Brenda McSween, and I am the owner of Parenting Foundations. I'm a pediatric sleep consultant and a parenting coach. I am honored to have been invited here to speak with you today about your child's sleep. It is a subject that I'm very, very passionate about, because let's admit, when we're tired, it's very hard to function, right? So there are times when we can do little things that will help enhance your child's sleep. And I'm hoping that with a few of these tips today, that will help you, okay? One of the very first things that I want you to remember is that there's going to be some recommendations thrown at you, like the recommended amount of sleep that your child should be getting. The thing is, they're just that. They're recommendations, right? If your child is doing well, like they're sleeping okay, then don't worry about the recommendations. If your child needs improvement, use it as a guideline, but don't see it as set in stone, okay? Because the reality is, if we lined up 20 children, they may all have different sleep needs, okay? And we need to keep that into consideration for sure, okay? So let's hop into it. One of the biggest things that I have seen as a sleep consultant working with families whose children are on the autism spectrum is that the sleep needs are very varied. And one of the biggest things is helping to get your child to sleep in the first place is a big hurdle. Once that is accomplished, you can get to more consolidated sleep. But it's that initial routine that can often be an issue. Okay, so first things, let's talk about the recommended amount of sleep for your child. So according to a study that was done back in 2016 by I want to make sure I get this right, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, this is the piece that most sleep medicine, sleep doctors, and sleep consultants base their hours of recommendation off of. And what they recommend is, so from birth to 4 months is 14 to 17 hours, and then 4 months to 12 months is 12 to 15 hours. 1 year to 3 years, they recommend 11 to 14 hours of sleep. And that includes your nap and overnight sleep. So I want you to keep that in mind when you're thinking, okay, well, my 3-year-old is only getting 9 hours overnight. If they're still napping during the day for 2 hours, then that's 11 hours in total. So that meets the recommendations. Okay? So please remember that when you are doing the calculation. All right, from 3 to 5 years of age, the recommendation is between 10 to 13 hours in total. Okay? And then 5 to 12 years is 9 to 12 hours of sleep. And then from 12 to 18 years of age, it's from 8 to 10 hours of total sleep. Okay? Hopefully, that gives you a guideline. But remember, it's just that, a guideline. The next thing to look at is your child's behavior. If your child is able to be involved in the activities that they typically are during the day, and they are engaged in behavior that is very typical for them, then you know that they're getting enough sleep. One of the biggest things that I have seen is when a child is overtired, can be very difficult to help them shut down or to help them calm their body enough that they can get ready for sleep. So looking at that behavior, I recently worked with a client where their child went from being overstimulated, using some stimming behavior, And then once we got the sleep a little bit more consolidated, those behaviors reduced. Okay, so that's a good sign. His hours of sleep were still less than other children the same age. Okay, but that was good for him. So keep that in mind. All right. So in order for your child to be able to get the recommended amount of sleep, it's important that we set them up so that they can accomplish that. One of the very first things that we need to do is set up their sleep environment so that it's conducive for sleep. Because let's be real. If their environment is not one that's set up so that they're going to be able to stay asleep, then all the hard work you put into getting them to sleep, it's for naught, because their sleep environment's not conducive to keep them sleeping. What is a good sleep environment for a child? Well, one that is quiet. So the less noise, the better. If your child is okay with using white noise is really good because it can drown out any background noise that can be affecting your child throughout the night. So the way it works, this is a very brief version of what happens when we fall asleep. Is when we fall asleep, we go into various cycles of sleep. So when you're going through a cycle of sleep, it usually consists of 4 to 5 stages of sleep. I say 4 to 5 because depending on who you talk to, there are some people that believe it's 4 stages and some that believe it's 5. Those that believe in 4 typically combine stage 3 and 4 from the 5 stages of sleep together. And it makes sense. Okay, so when you first fall asleep, you're in stage 1. Stage 1 is extremely light. It's an extremely light stage of sleep. And then in that extremely light stage of sleep, you're easily woke up. So the next stage, stage 2, is a stage of sleep where it's still light, but not as light as stage 1, so you're not easily woke up like you are in stage 1. Stage 3 is deep sleep. That's when you can pick your child's arm up and it flops down, right? If you pick your child's arm up and it kind of slowly goes down, you know they're not quite asleep. But if you go like this and it just flops, then you know that your child is in that deep stage of sleep. Stage 4 is still deep, but it's lighter than stage 3. And then you get into stage 5. And stage 5 is actually always referred to as REM sleep, so the rapid eye movement sleep. During rapid eye movement sleep, that's when our bodies, so it's often referred to as active sleep. Okay, so in active sleep, so when your child's in this REM stage, they could be making noise, moving around, and doing things like that, but they're still sleeping. Okay, they're still asleep. It's just, it can be very active and noisy. And that's that final stage. A typical sleep cycle lasts between 60 to 90 minutes. It can be about 45 for some children. Okay, so once you get to know what your child's sleep cycle is like, you'll know that at the end of a sleep cycle, that's when we typically we wake slightly, but then we can go into the next cycle of sleep without much issue if we don't rely on something to help us get to sleep in the first place. And that's one thing that we'll talk about here in a bit. Okay, so keeping in mind this cycle of sleep, you and I, as adults, would probably have between six to 8 cycles of sleep. Our children may have anywhere from 8 to 10 cycles of sleep a night. Okay, so at the beginning of the night, beginning of their first sleep cycle, if they fall asleep and then a big noise happens in their sleep environment, what can happen is they wake up again and then they're awake for a while. So what you want to do is make sure that the sleep environment is conducive so that when they fall asleep, they stay asleep. That's why white noise is your friend. Okay? Simple thing to use for white noise, especially with older children, is a fan. My young man is 9 years old, and we still have a fan on in his room. And the reason we do that is to help him drown out those outside noises so that it doesn't impact his sleep. Because if he's in the middle of a sleep cycle, or actually closer to the end, and he's in the REM stage, and our neighbor comes home and honks the horn, it's not going to affect him. It doesn't affect him because that white noise is keeping things blocked enough. Okay? Now, here's the thing that you need to know about white noise. Not all people like white noise. They don't like the sound. It can be aggravating for some people. So one of the things to look at is that there's actually different types of noise that you can get. One of the things to do is you can Google search the colors of noise, and so you can get, like, there's brown noise, there's pink noise, there's blue, I believe, and there's all different shades basically of noise. And you'll find that even though you have a white noise machine, it may actually be using other types of noise. They just don't label it as white noise. That's what we know it as. But if you look at, like, a lot of times now they're marketing them as sound machines, and that's why. Okay? Because there's different frequencies and different things that people can tolerate. So you could play around with that a little bit to see what your child likes and enjoys. And if the big thing with white noise is you have to make sure it stays on the entire time your child's sleeping. Okay? There's a lot of really cute sound machines that shut off after 45 to 60 minutes. And that's usually right at the end of a nap cycle for young children, but it can also be very close to the end of a sleep cycle for an older person. So at the end, if it's shutting off, that's not being very helpful. So just keep it on the entire time. Okay. If you're concerned that your child's going to get to the point where they need it all the time, then what you can do over time is start to shut it down slowly, like reduce how loud it is. Okay? All right, so white noise will be your friend. You want it to be quiet. You want the environment to be as... So if the white noise, you don't want it to be super loud. You just want it to be enough that it's dulling any outside noise. Usually about 50 to 55 decibels is what's recommended. Okay? Then the next thing is dark. You want it to be a dark environment. The darker, the better. And the reason for that is because our bodies naturally produce melatonin. You've most likely heard about the melatonin hormone. And melatonin gets produced by your bodies when it's time for us to go to sleep at night. Okay? If your child is still napping, they're not getting melatonin to help them nap. It's more their body saying, I need a rest, and then they can sleep. But melatonin doesn't get produced during nap time, but it does get produced during nighttime, and it helps with your circadian rhythm, right? And that circadian rhythm is the rhythm that we are in to help us know the difference between night and day, right? So, dark room. The darker, the better. I actually recommend that you go into your child's room in, like, when it's really dark. If your child's asleep, even better. Go in, you shut the door, and you look and see what light sources are there. There's very hidden light sources. One of the most hidden one is any light coming in underneath the door. Okay, so if there's anything coming in under the door, you can try to eliminate that by, shutting off hall lights or whatever. And then the other thing is definitely blackout blinds. Blackout blinds, blackout curtains will help with the light that's coming in from outside. When this really helps is in the morning hours for sure, because especially getting into the summertime, the sun's coming up earlier and earlier, and our bodies do naturally start to reduce the melatonin production according to the sun. But if you're not subjected to the sun, if you're in a room that's dark, you can set your own circadian rhythm that way. Okay? So the darker, the better. Here's another issue that happens with that, though, is often a lot of our children end up going through a bit of a fear of the dark. And if that's happening, if you're thinking that your child needs to have some light in their room, then the light to try is red light. Red light does not stop the production of melatonin. The next best is amber. Okay? So red light does not stop the production of melatonin. So if you need light, use red light. Okay? That will really help. And then the next thing about the environment would be the temperature of the room. Ideal temperature for sleep is between 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. Okay? So if you're okay with it being a bit cool, then like 18, even 17, if you're really okay with that, is really good, because it helps. That actually helps the body be able to regulate and stuff with sleep as well. So I would recommend looking at the temperature of your child's room. That can help. So that's your sleep environment. And setting up a good sleep environment then has your child ready to be able to actually fall asleep, right? Now, is it just that easy? Now you set up the environment so they should be sleeping? Absolutely not. Okay. The next thing that we look at is routine. Getting some routines in place so that your child knows that bedtime is next, that this is happening. And the other thing that happens is that their body starts to naturally start the production of melatonin when the routine gets started. Okay, so what I would recommend is that the bedtime routine that you put in place is one that is good for your child. The reason I say that, and the reason I say it that way, is on purpose. It's because you'll often hear that the bedtime routine should be something that's very quiet, it's very short, it's, there's so many different things. But in reality, lots of children really do well with a very active bedtime routine. They need to get some of their sensory needs met before bedtime. So looking at your child's sensory diet and seeing if you can implement some things at the beginning of the bedtime routine to help with their body's process of calming would be ideal. Right? One of the big things that I actually often recommend at the beginning of the bedtime routine is a bit of play and interaction. And then after that, if your child does well with a bath, then doing a bath. And like that water play and stuff can be very soothing and helpful. So you got your play, bath, then you're going to be doing getting on pajamas, brushing teeth, and then going into bed. And once they get into bed, they can do you can do a couple stories. I would recommend 2 stories, and then after your child's had their stories read and they're all tucked in, then you can start. There's a few different things that you can do to help your child go to sleep and stay asleep. And the first thing you can do is actually try staying in the room with them until they fall asleep, and then slowly work your way from the bed to the middle of the room, from the middle of the room to the door and from the door out the door. So you spend 3 or 4 nights where you're at the bed, 3 or 4 nights in the middle of the room, 3 or 4 nights at the door, 3 or 4 nights out the door. And the reason why you want to be out the door is if your child gets up and comes out, you can simply go and bring them back to bed again. Okay, so that's your bedtime routine. And what I talked about at the end of that bedtime routine is actually considered the camp out method. And that's a camp out sleep training method. And you can modify that to meet your child's needs. Okay. Now, there are a number of things to consider implementing and doing with your bedtime routine that will help, that have helped a number of children. And that is adding things like if your occupational therapist has recommended a weighted blanket, I would look at that. Looking at a weighted blanket or a compression sheet can be very helpful. Looking at things like lavender sprays and stuff can be very helpful for kids that don't get overstimulated by the smell. So if your child is one that doesn't get overstimulated, then by smells, then I would look at using lavender and a peppermint kind of mix, and that seems to be quite helpful. All right, and then now what do you do if your you've nailed it, got the good sleep environment, the routine's good, now what? Well, the next thing, and things are going swimmingly, except your child's waking up at 2, 4, and 6, right? What do you do about night wakings? Well, you do the exact same thing that you did at bedtime, at nighttime. One of the pitfalls that we end up falling into a lot at nighttime is when our little ones wake up, we go in, we turn on the light, we meet their needs. So instead of going in, turning on the light and meeting their needs, going in and offering the support and comfort that your child needs, but do it in that dark environment. Okay? Keeping it as dark as possible. If you have to use a light, use the red light. You may find that you have to put more comfort into your child's going to bed or going back to sleep routine. You may end up giving them like a little bit of a hug to go back to sleep, and that's all okay. Okay. Now, this is a subject that I hope I was able to give you some tips and tricks of things that you can do to help your little one improve their sleep. Okay. I could talk and talk and talk about this. So feel free to reach out and get some more information if you choose. I'm happy to do so, and I will be available after this chat in the question period that's going to occur. Okay, I will make myself available for that, and I look forward to it. So please send as many questions as you have, and I will answer them as I can. So take care and have yourself a wonderful